Hello, good morning. So we're going to start a brand new unit, living things and the environment. So the essential question that we would have to pretty much answer throughout the unit is how do living things interact with and depend on each other, on other parts of the ecosystem and each other, of course. So this would be the standard that we would be covering. Make sure you are going into CPOMs, looking at the lesson. It's very important. They have very, very good notes also. So for this particular standard, we're going to be explaining and illustrating the rules of and relationships among producers, consumers, and the process of decomposers in and of energy transfers in a food web. So in a gym class, for example, have you ever been assigned to play a position like catcher or a goalie for the class team? If so, you know what it's like to have a specific role in a system. So similar to positions in sports, every organism has a role in the movement of energy throughout the ecosystem. Energy roles are based on the way organisms obtain food and interact with other organisms. In an ecosystem, organisms play the energy role of either a producer, consumer, or a decomposer. Energy enters most ecosystems as sunlight. Some organisms, such as plants shown in figure 1, or like I have the one on the PowerPoint, and sometimes bacteria capture the energy of sunlight. These organisms use sun's energy to recombine atoms from molecules of water and carbon dioxide into food molecules in a process called photosynthesis. An organism that can make its own food is called a producer. Producers become the source of food for other organisms in an ecosystem. In a few ecosystems, producers obtain energy from a source other than sunlight. Deep in the ocean, some bacteria convert chemical energy into food from hydrothermal vents in the ocean floor. They are the producers in these ecosystems that include worms, clams, and crabs. Organisms like regular animals out in the wild, cannot produce their own food. A consumer obtains energy by feeding on other animals. Scientists classify consumers according to what they eat. As consumers eat, the food is broken down into molecules and helps supply them with energy. Consumers that eat only animals are called carnivores. Great white sharks, owls, and tigers are examples of carnivores. Some carnivores are scavengers. A scavenger is a carnivore that feeds on the bodies of dead organisms. Scavengers include hagfish and condors. Some carnivores will scavenge if they cannot find live animals to prey upon. Herbivores are consumers that eat only plants and other photosynthetic organisms. Grasshoppers, rabbits, and cows are herbivores. Consumers that eat both plants and animals are called omnivores. Raccoons, pigs, and humans are omnivores. So remember, we have carnivores that eat just meat. We have omnivores that eat meat and plants, or we have herbivores that only eat plants. If the only energy role in an ecosystem were producers and consumers, then most of the matter that is essential for life, such as carbon and nitrogen, would remain in the waste products and remains of dead organisms. However, decomposers have a role in ecosystems to prevent this from happening. Decomposers break down biotic waste in dead organisms, returning the raw materials in an ecosystem. For example, after adult salmon swim upstream and reproduce, they die. Their carcasses litter the riverbed and banks. Bacteria in the soil help break down the carcasses, releasing their nutrients to trees, grasses, shrubs, and other producers that depend on them. In a sense, decomposers are nature's recyclers. While obtaining energy for their own needs, decomposers also return matter in the form of simple molecules to the environment. These molecules can be used again by other organisms. Mushrooms, bacteria, and mold are common decomposers. So remember, it's very important for us to have decomposers because we would just have all of these dead organisms out without being decomposed. And it's very important for it to be decomposed because it's releasing all of the carbon that they have stored up, meat, things like that inside of them back into the environment. So it's pretty much like their decomposers are like the recycling center of the world. Energy in most ecosystems comes from sunlight, and producers convert this energy into food through photosynthesis. The energy and matter are contained in atoms and molecules that are transferred to herbivores that eat the producers. Then they move on to carnivores, feeding on the first or primary consumers. The energy and matter next move on through other meat-eating secondary consumers. This movement of energy and matter can be described through different models: food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids. So a food chain is just one way to show how energy and matter move through an ecosystem. A food chain is a series of events in which one organism eats another and it obtains energy and nutrients. The arrows indicate the movement of energy and matter as organisms are consumed up in the food chain. Now, a food web, on the other hand, shows how energy and matter move in one direction through only matter and energy only move in one direction through a food chain. Now, a food web, on the other hand, shows most producers and consumers are part of many overlapping food chains. For example, a salmon can be consumed by a shark in the ocean before it even has a chance to migrate upstream and encounter a bear. A more realistic way to show how energy and matter cycle through an ecosystem is through the use of a food web. A food web is consisting of many overlapping food chains in an ecosystem, and are organisms that play more than one role in an ecosystem. A crayfish is an omnivore that is a first-level consumer when it eats plants. However, when a crayfish eats a snail, it is a second-level consumer. So if you look at, for example, we have this aquatic food web. So at the bottom, we're going to have plankton. So plankton can be eaten by a penguin, for example. So we would have our plankton being our producers. Okay, they are getting sunlight and they're creating their own food. Now it goes to the primary consumer, which would be the penguin. Now, a penguin can be eaten by a seal, which would be our second level consumer. Okay, so it goes in order. Now our squid, a squid can also be eaten by a seal. So squid can be a secondary consumer because plankton can also be eaten by our first primary consumer over here, a krill. Then krill can be eaten by squid, which would be our second level consumer. And then a squid can be eaten by a seal, and thus the seal can be a third level consumer also. So it just depends where the animal is at and where your producers are. So for example, over here we have carrots, grasses, and grains. These are all going to be our producers. Now we have our first level consumers, which are our rabbits. We can have a mice or a grasshopper. Okay, those are our second level consumers. And then we have our third level consumers over here. That could be a fox, it could be an owl, it could be a bird. But we have this bird can also be eaten by this fox. So even though this fox can be a third level consumer, it can also be a fourth level consumer because it's eating this bird that was originally our third level. So it just depends where it's at. It's actually very easy to understand. Okay, now the energy pyramid. So a diagram called the energy pyramid shows the amount of energy that moves up from one feeding level to another in a food web. Each step in a food chain or food web is represented by a level within an energy pyramid. Producers have the most available energy, so they make up the pyramid from the producers to the first level consumers to the second level consumers, and so on. There is no limit to the number of levels in a food web or an energy pyramid. However, the more levels that exist between a producer and a given consumer, the smaller the percentage of the original energy from the consumers that is available to that consumer. Each level has less energy available than the level before. When an organism consumes food, it obtains energy and matter used to carry out life activities. These activities produce heat, which is released and lost to the environment, reducing the amount of energy available to the next level. So normally, we would say that around 10% of energy is lost as you go up this energy pyramid. So like we said, we have the producers right on the bottom. We have all of our plants or bacteria, things like that, that can produce their own food through sunlight and things like that. Then we're going to move on to our first level consumers, our herbivores. They're going to be eating all of our plants. And then we have our carnivores that eat, let's say, the rabbit or the bunny that's eating our grass, and up there. So this is one reason why, for example, producers have the most energy, like we just said. Now, herbivores need to eat a lot of producers to be able to get the same amount of energy that these producers have. Obviously, they won't be able to get all of the energy because remember I just said that 10% is lost, but they would eat a lot of producers to obtain the energy that they need. Now, same thing with carnivores. Carnivores need a lot of herbivores before they are full pretty much. So just remember that as you go up the energy pyramid, you're going to be losing at least 10% each step up. So yeah, just this thing I just said, same is 10% energy that's past the high limit. So it limits the amount of consumers that can be supported. So that is why these consumers have to be eating a lot of the bottom levels to keep their energy enough. So as you can see in this figure, only about 10% of the energy at one level of food web is available to the next higher level. So this greatly limits how much different levels of food chain can have, as well as organisms that can be supported at higher levels. So if you see, there's only, in this case, 2 organisms on top of the energy pyramid. Same thing over here, we have these 2, we have these 3, so the higher you go, the less animals you are going to have because of the energy availability. So I'm actually gonna pause here for today. Make sure you're taking very good notes. Make sure you're looking at seed poems, looking at the lessons. It's very important for you to take very good notes so I can help you on the lesson checks in addition to any other work that I may assign. We are almost done with this quarter, so make sure you're getting everything in. This school year is almost over, so just keep it up, okay? Have a great rest of your day.